good afternoon. Thank you for taking your time, especially to be here. I'm very excited to share with you what your children are actually learning. It's a curriculum on Midas that really belongs in the minds of young children, even though it's kind of obvious to us as adults. But it kind of struck me that we're living in a translated religion where when we're speaking about Hashem and the Torah mitzvahs, we're speaking in this case in English, and there are many words that I'm not doing justice to in English because they're not really reflecting the original meaning. And when it comes to Midas, there are quite a few words that are being, I don't want to say mistranslated deliberately, that's not the case, it's an innocent mistranslation, but it sends my mind in a completely different place. But when we get to grips with the original Hebrew, it will open up worlds to us. So I'll give you just as an example, the very word midah. We all know it has two meanings. What are the two meanings of midah? Means measure, and also means value. You can as measuring a value of something. So it's very similar. Measure, value. If you say trait, as in character trait. Also, Rabbanu Shalom, Master of the Universe, in English got a separate word for measure, a separate word for value, a separate word for character trait. Why do you have one word that means all of those? And the answer is there are no mistakes in Lashon HaKodesh, in this perfect language. Because what's the true measure of a human being? Height, weight, body shape, car, home, zip code, career, how much money I have in the bank. We know those are measures, but that's not the measure of a human being. Oh, it's character. Oh, so the word midah has to mean both because it's indicating what counts the most, so to speak, in God's eyes. What does He measure as what matters the most? So we're going to discover that every single midah that you can identify, both in the Torah itself, Tanakh, and the Rabbanan, every single one of them, bar none, takes place in the same location, between our ears. And here's where we're going to enter the world of Lashon HaKodesh to really get a grip on things. And I'm going to quote just a few mekorot, a few sources at the beginning, so I can establish this, that you're not just hearing it like, this is Rabbi Rietti's opinion. I have no opinion. I have no right to an opinion. If I can source what I'm sharing with you, and it's a genuine makora, it really is true, then I'm sharing, so to speak, God's mind. The word lev, we unfortunately follow I'm not going to call it a mistranslation, but it's a decoy, and it's not deliberate, it's an innocent mistranslation. We translate the word lev as heart. Now why do I say mistranslate? It's not a complete, total mistranslation, but it's a serious problem because throughout the Torah you can have one word that has multiple meanings. So for example, the word lev actually has three meanings. Sometimes it refers to your physical heart. So for example, Aaron HaKohen, he wears the choshen, the breastplate, al libo, against his heart. It's referring to the physical location behind his rib cage, in his chest. The choshen is placed against the heart. In the halachot of, it's okay if I say Sephardic pronunciation, I can do Ashkenaz also. I'm actually raised Sephardi even though I'm Italian.
You have to honor our location.
Yes, okay, good. Decided. I'm actually more comfortable with Sephardic pronunciation, but I can probably slip here and there. So actually, the word lev can also be a metaphor. For example, Kafu tehomot belev yam. We say every morning in Az Yashir, when we cross the Yam Suf, Kafu tehomot, the ground congealed, became hardened, belev yam. There's no heart in the sea, and it's an expression, a metaphor for the center, in the middle. Moshe Rabbeinu, in his description of Mamad HaSinai, when he goes through a review of all our journeys, you'll find in Perek Dalet, Pasuk Yud Aleph, in Parshat Vayitchanan, Moshe Rabbeinu says, V'hahar, the mountain, in reference to HaSinai, Boer was flaming, ad leiv hashamayim, till the heart in heaven. There's no heart in heaven, it means in the midst. As Rashi says, Toch. in the midst of the black fire, the cloud, the lightning, the thunder, and the shofar. The third meaning of lev is the one that's the most frequent. And here's where it's mistranslated as heart. Lev means mind. That's the vast majority of times. Actually, the Maharal offers, if you want to know the meaning of any word, identify where it first appears in the Torah. The context, the pasuk of that word will help you understand the meaning of that word. The first time the word lev appears in the Torah is in Perek Vav, pasuk Hey, right at the end of Parashat Bereshit. We just had it. Vayara Hashem saw ki rabba ra'at ha'adam. The negativity, the evil of mankind was so abundant. V'kol yetzer machshavot libo rak kol hayom. And the design of the thoughts of his libo were only bad all day long. Where do you do your thinking? Machshava means thought. So where do you do your thinking? In your heart or in your mind? For those still awake. We do it in our mind. Oh, so Mahashavot libo is referring to mind. We say every morning in our davening, it's actually a pasuk that's borrowed from Mishlei, Perek Yud Tet pasuk Kaf Aleph. Rabot mahashavot be-levish. There are many thoughts in the mind of a person. Don't look at the translations because they mistranslated, not deliberately. It's a completely innocent translation. I'm not going into the history of that, but very simple, within a few seconds, the Christian translation of our Torah predated, so to speak, all our scholars who only in the last 40 years started translating Torah versions of many of our Sfarim. And in those Torah versions, many, many times, we selected a popular translation instead of digging a drop deeper to see what does the word mean in Lashon HaKodesh, what do the Rishonim actually say, or Chazal say this word means, and so we're stuck translating certain words in one way, and that's it. For example, Na'ar, we translate almost always one way. We translate it as a youth, a young lad. So in Perek Chaf Bet, in Bereshit, Avram Avinu, Vayikach Shnei Na'arim, he took his two young lads. Who were these two young lads with him escorting Yitzhak to the Akedah? Yishmael, at that time, he was 14 years older than Yitzhak. Yitzhak was 37. So how old is Yishmael? I'm not good at that math. 37 plus 14. We can take a vote if you prefer. Okay, it's 51. So Yishmael is 51 years old at that time. Eliezer says Sedek Olam, he was 76. Are you okay calling them both young lads? Do you hear a slight problem with the translation? Yeshua is called Hana'ar, young lad. Shelo Yamush Metoch HaOhel. Perek Lamed Bet, going to Lamed Gimel, at the scene of the Chet HaEgel, the golden calf. He never left the tent of Moshe Rabbeinu, and he's called a Na'ar. He was 46. Are you okay calling him a young lad? Do you see that the translation may not be accurate, and it doesn't even help us? I'm not giving you other examples. There are a lot of mistranslations that are innocent because they've taken a Christian original text, which is popular ad hayom, and we're translating that way. The problem is that when we do that, we lose out on the hashkafa, a huge panoramic view, a treasure of information that changes our mind, changes our lev, will change our mind. I'll give you one quick example. Yarden. Unfortunately, most of the time we translate it. So it's a tragedy because Yarden, I don't have to call it Jordan. Why call it the Jordan River? I just call it the Yarden. If I call it Jordan, I have locked out God's language and the treasure hidden in the word Yarden. Yarden has a shorish, as every word in Hebrew does. What's Yarden mean? What's Yarad? Go down. How far will water go down? As far as it can, the lowest point. Where's the lowest place on planet Earth? The Dead Sea, Yam HaMelech, which is fed by the Yarden. And which Shevet, which tribe does the Yarden originate from? The Pamya springs in Shevet Dan. Oh, Yarad Dan is coming down from the Shevet of Dan, and Dan is the two-letter root of din. What does din mean? Judgment. How does God judge how much rain, parnasah, should come to Eretz Yisrael? Oh, it depends on our mitzvot, our hesed. Oh, it depends on our Torah, our tefillah. Oh, so yara din. The water comes down based on, and it's all inside one word, which got frozen in Jordan, which is a bar. Not a drinking bar, but it's also the name of an excellent basketball player, but it's not helping us. Do you understand? It's a decoy. It sends us in a completely different direction. And imagine now on a test, your child is asked, what's the translation of Yarden? And she writes Jordan. Do you understand? That's not education. So now we're going to look at the word lev more closely. Because once we know it means mind, we also have to understand, so what is the connection between the mind and the heart? Because usually we talk about the heart as the icon of emotions. And yet there doesn't seem to be such a word in Lashon HaKodesh. What's even more strange is that if Lashon HaKodesh is, as we claim it to be, the language which created reality, then if there's a word in English with no equivalent in Hebrew, what does that mean? What does that tell us about the English word? It doesn't exist in God's dictionary. It's a human perception of our reality, but it's not. If we want to know, Hashem, what's your reality? Do you follow the problem here? Because we're going to discover there's a lot of words we have. Let's say, I'm just going to just quickly give you one example. Chayim. How do we usually translate Chayim? We translate Chayim as life. So that unfortunately, we all know the word Chayim is Lashon Yachid or Rabin. Is it singular or plural? So what's the correct translation? Lives. There is no word in biblical Hebrew, throughout Tanakh, there's no word that translates correctly as life. The word chai is an adjective, means alive. Od Am Yisrael chai. We are still alive. Od Yosef chai. Od Avinu chai. Our father is still alive. There's no word for life. That means it doesn't exist. Excuse me, I'm right now alive in this world. Yeah, but this world is one dimension, but we don't believe in one dimension. We believe in lives. Oh, there's Olam HaSheker and Olam HaEmet. You can't have a word in Lashon HaKodesh for something that doesn't exist. Now I'm going to give you a clue that will help you with the answer to the next question. You can have a word that's inclusive of something that we think it means, but it doesn't. Example. We have no word in Lashon HaKodesh for feeling. There is no such word. Now, Hergesh, oh, that's very popular, but that's in biblical Hebrew, the word regesh does not mean feeling. Regesh, throughout Tanakh, is a kibbutz gadol biyachad, a large gathering of people. The Totzah, the product of lots of people coming together for the same 10,000 Jews saying Tehillim for Klal Yisrael in a huge stadium in Monsey, or 100,000 pro-Palestinians coming together in Trafalgar Square in London. There's an excitement that people feel biyachad, but there's no word for feeling or emotion. And the reason why, and this is a little bit of a bombshell if we haven't learned it this way in Yeshiva or Beis Yaakov, is because the word lev, first and foremost, means thought, mind. The moment you think something, you feel it. So we didn't need a word for feeling because it's included in the word lev, which means mind. The moment you think something, your heart, your physical heart, responds. And in doing so, the heartbeat, which is constantly moving to what's going on inside my mind. If someone screams at me from behind, and I haven't got a moment to recognize the voice, like I jump from fright, so in that moment, where I don't know what's happening, my body will actually react to my mind, which says, I don't know what's happening. Am I in danger? And my heart will lose a beat, and my entire body my hairs might stand on end. Your body reacts to what you're thinking in real time. So, the word lev actually immediately translates as thought that you feel. We're always feeling what we're thinking. There are no exceptions in history. I'm always feeling what I'm thinking. I'm going to share with you a few examples from actual Mekorot. Is it possible to whisper? Thank you. One of the most famous? No, I'm good, thank you. I appreciate the offer. One of the most famous verses in our Torah is "Ve'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha." Love Hashem with all your. So we translate it usually as heart. Now, when lev is doubled over levavecha, it refers to your thoughts. It's plural. This is brought in Sefer Haredim in chapter 9. He tells you that when the word lev is doubled over, it's referring to thoughts. It's the plural of what's taking place inside your lev, your mind. It's going to be a little bit difficult. Every time I say lev, you're thinking mind, but it does take a while. But I'm just going to share with you from Rishonim and Aharonim that the word lev is referring to machshava. It's referring to thought. Because once you know that, all of a sudden, a lot of psukim start to make a lot more sense. See, hatred is not something I feel in my heart until I'm thinking hatred. And the proof is the pasuk itself. In chapter 18, verse 17, Lo tisna et achicha, don't hate your brother, bilvavecha, in your thoughts. Do you follow? It's a simple logic. Once I know it's my thinking that's making me hate this person, and that's why I feel angry or resentful towards that person, what's generating it is not what the person said or did. It's my thinking about what they said or did that's making me hate that person. And it's impossible that God would actually ask me to do something I cannot do. That's simply impossible. So he's not asking me to control my emotions in the typical sense. He's telling me to control the source of my emotions, which is taking place over here. So I'm sharing with you right now on the pasuk, Perek Vav, pasuk Hey, in Parshat V'etchanan, love Hashem b'chol levavecha, with all your thoughts, comes along Eben Ha'ezer, a Rishon, and Ramban with a Nun, a Rishon, and say three words. Lev, hu hada'at. Lev, oh, that's the mind. I've got it recorded here. If any of you want this, I'll bring copies next week. Or if you want to show your husbands. The Radak, Sefer HaShirashim, he's relied upon tremendously in the world of dikduk, of grammar, and he'll tell you that the word lev means da'at. So for example, he gives, amongst other examples, he says, Ulefi shahalev hu mishkan ha'sechel. Your lev is the abode of your thinking, your mind. Sechel is actually referring to measuring. That's where the word scale comes from. Because sechel, scale, there are thousands of words in English that originate from Lashon HaKodesh. And if you want, maybe one day I'll give you a presentation on that. It's mind-blowing. You can literally become just from seeing how many words in English come from Lashon HaKodesh. If you interchange... Sorry?
The opposite is also true.
Seichel?
Lashon HaKodesh, but from, Ivrit.
Oh, in Ivrit. Yeah. That's true. And many times Israelis who hear the presentation on the power of Lashon HaKodesh and see the Chochmah, they realize they're much more familiar than we are with this language, and they're speaking a lot of Lashon HaKodesh in modern Hebrew. It's mind-boggling when they realize that this language originated in Lashon HaKodesh. It's really, really mind-boggling. Rabbi Dr. Tzvi Inbal, he hasn't published it yet. It's an encyclopedia of 50,000 pages so far. And it's more than just identifying how all the root words in Lashon HaKodesh multiply into multiple meanings and how they're all correlated and how it works in other languages. But going back to the Radak, so he says, Lefi shalev hu mishkan ha'sechel. That's why Shlomo Malach writes in Mishlei, Perek Yutet Pasuk Het, Ama knei lev. Obtain a lev. Ki'ilu ama koneh da'at. What he's really saying is acquire a mind. Now, you and I are born with a mind, but it's saying what do we fill our mind with? As Chazal tell us, Ein ani ela b'deya. It's a Gemara in Nedarim Mem Aleph Amud Aleph, I believe it is. There's no poverty except in the mind. So that means I could have a PhD, 3 PhDs. A person could have multiple degrees in many intelligences, and yet the Torah will say he's a very poor man. Because poor doesn't mean in intelligence. It's talking about poor thinking. That a person could have so many blessings in their life, and I let the media, which I think is a very interesting word, media into two words in Hebrew, me, dea. Whose opinion is that? What's the source? You heard it from someone else, and who did they hear it from? So if I let the media take over my mind, and I start becoming both frightened, anxious, worried, fearful, that might be a normal, almost healthy response initially, but what am I supposed to do after that? So Chazal give us lots of examples, and I'll be going through that with this group together when we go through different midot, like simcha, happiness. We're going to look at da'aga, which we can translate plurally as fear, anxiety, worry. We're going to look at these words, and we're going to see that in Lashon HaKodesh, especially from Mishlei, from Shlomo Melech, who's only Chacham Mikol Adam, it's so comprehensive that in simple words helps us recognize that when I'm experiencing anger, it's not my anger here that I'm experiencing, it's my thoughts that I'm experiencing. If I'm frustrated and I have the courage to tell you I'm frustrated, I say courage because what I'm actually admitting to is that I'm experiencing thoughts of frustration, and I'm listening to those thoughts and I'm letting it take over my whole body. If I'm stressed out by the traffic, I actually believe it's the traffic that's stressing. I'm late. How can I not be stressed? I'm late for an important, and it's just no end. It's not, the car in front of me can't go inside my brain and press my stress button. That's not how reality works. I've got to think about the traffic stressing me out. That's what's stressing me. And the proof is, if you get an interesting passenger sitting next to you, and it's such a stimulating conversation, or a friend that you haven't spoken to for ages and you're in the car together, every red light that's delaying the appointment is a simcha to you because you got more time with this stimulating character. So you see, everything that we're experiencing is really what we're thinking. There are no exceptions. I can only experience life through here. So we're going to be covering a number of different metaphors to bring this home again and again, and some of them I'll be sharing with you, the metaphors that I'll be using with your special daughters, to understand how life is not outside in. It's not what's happening to me. It's what's, so to speak, happening through me. What am I thinking about what's happening? And the Torah is not silent on anything. It gives us clarity on every imaginable scenario of how to respond, starting here. Because that's what matters the most. So poverty of the mind could be that I have so many blessings in my life, but I'm so sucked into whatever's going on that I don't like in my life, or my wife, or my health, or my wealth, or my spouse, or my house. I'm a poet, and I know it. If I'm so sucked into the situation and circumstances and people, I can actually stop or put on pause all the blessings that are taking place every moment of my life. So I need an inventory every morning. Do I still have my eyes? Oh, thank God, I can still see in full color, three-dimensional. Oh, this is great. Zoikev kifufim. Oh my gosh, my spine's still functioning, and the nervous system and everything that's attached to my spine, between all my bones, my sinews, and my muscles. So there's an inventory every morning that Chazal legislated because they saw that we were losing our grip on simcha, the most simple things in life. So amongst other things, they legislated nearly 2,000 years ago that I have to go through a list, a checklist every morning. Mal b'sharumim. Yeah, my wardrobe's always good. I love my wardrobe. Shasali kol sarki. You provide me with every need I need, including my shoes, which is what it's also referring to. I've got quite a few shoes. Yeah, I love my shoes. The biggest enemy is my mind. And the biggest enemy of the Yetzer Hara, which we're going to translate not according to Christian translations. Am I offending anybody if I translate the Torah based on the Torah itself and not Christian translation? I want to be accused of breaking away from the Masorah. You're okay. Sorry for being facetious. So it comes along our Torah and gives us extraordinary simple clarity on the most simple of things. That life doesn't really happen outside in. It's always happening inside out. And there are no exceptions. Even anxiety, which I would, in the word da'aga, that's the real word for worry, anxiety, fear. In the world of da'aga, I totally underestimate the power of my mind. and completely overestimate the power of the thing that I think is the reason for my fear, worry, anxiety, daiga. It's not my language actually. It's right. I'm going to be sharing with you the Mekorot. It's actually out of Mishlei. It's fascinating when you look carefully and start realizing, oh my gosh, anxiety is talked about all the time in Mishlei, and he gives us the most simple, most embarrassingly simple solution. If I know where I'm experiencing worry, fear, if I really know I'm experiencing anger, frustration, kinna, jealousy, and it's all taking place in the exact same place, all I need now to focus on is what I'm thinking. Is this making sense so far? So I think I ought to just mention briefly Rachel Imenu, being it is her Yortzeit, and one of the amazing virtues in her short lifetime. She was married at 22 with her twin sister Leah, 1 week apart, and she was so exceptionally loyal and loving to her twin that she gave up the chance of being married to Yaakov. She took a huge risk in avoiding her sister being humiliated on the night that her sister was replaced by, instead of Rachel Imenu. She took a huge risk that Yaakov would be so upset and not want to marry Rachel for the deception. But she couldn't handle the possibility that her sister would not be married to this great tzaddik, and she would end up being married to Esav, someone who Leah, to her credit, astonishingly, she had permanent stains on her face. That I don't know, maybe today makeup would have worked, but she had such stains of rashes on her face from constant crying in tears from tefillah, praying to God, please don't let me fall into the lap of Esav. And Chazal tell us she would frequently ask passers-by who came from Eretz Canaan to the area of Haran in then Mesopotamia, today still Mesopotamia, in Naharaim, where Lavan and her father and Bethuel were. Leah would frequently ask about Esav. So here was someone who was not as beautiful as her twin sister, and it was brought about through tears, which she must have realized she's doing this to herself. But she knew the only way out of this was tefillah. Rachel Imenu was so loyal to her sister. Not only was she not jealous, she risked not marrying this tzaddik. So Rachel Imenu is astonishing in that the Torah tells us that she did have kinah for her sister, but Chazal tell us the kinah was for the fact that her sister was having children one after the other, and she had jealousy not because she was jealous of her sister. Why don't I have, you have, and I wish you didn't. She was jealous of her ma'asim tovim, of her chesed, that she knew was the real reason her sister was having more children. And a Mesiut Nefesh in Tefillah, Leah had more than anyone else amongst the 4 imahot for having a child. That's why she was zocher to 6 out of the 12 Shvatim. So that was just a quick commercial for Rachel Imenu, who taught us the power of tefillah, and Hashem was persuaded when she begged Hashem, if I can conquer my kinah, can't you conquer yours against the enemies of Avodah Zarah? And Hashem was maskim and said, I promise because of you, I will take my children out of Galut. So thank you, Rachel Imenu. And we're sorry we can't all be with you today, but as everyone knows, these are circumstances that are forced upon us. So back to our subject, I'll give you a couple more examples where you'll see Lev consistently means mind. Rabbi Victor Miller talks about this frequently, that the word Lev correctly translates as mind, and he has a sefer called Lev Avigdor, and in Siman Aleph, right at the beginning of the sefer, he brings on the title of the chapter, Chashivut Da'at Adam, the value, the importance of the mind of a human being. So he writes here, Hine, behold, Lev, the word Lev, Belashon HaKodesh, Misamen et Koach HaMachshava ve'HaHergesh. It's an icon, Simon, it's an iconic word. Lev is an iconic word that refers to what you're thinking and feeling. If you want to hear it spelled out even more, Rabbi Yaakov Meir Shechter I didn't see this, I saw this inside his Sefer, but he's quoting from the Balatanya in Lukatei Torah, which I didn't have a home to quote it from, but he quotes Rabbi Yaakov Meir Shechter from the Balatanya. The Balatanya writes the following words. Shekol hergeshe ha'adam. Now regesh here does mean feeling, because that's a rabbinic term that we've adopted in even modern Hebrew. In biblical Hebrew, it refers to a large group of people. There's no word for emotion, because it's already included in lev, which immediately translates as what I'm feeling, because I'm always feeling what I'm thinking. So it says, Kol hergeshe ha'adam, all the emotions, all the feelings of a person, nimshachim are drawn acha machshavato, after what he's thinking, his thought. K'sha'adam choshev me'ezu inyan shel atzvut, if I pay attention to a thought, concern that is depressing or causing me anxiety, hofech hu et atzmo la'atzev v'doeg. I turn myself into a situation where I'm experiencing anxiety and worry. V'ilu ki shechoshev al dava shel simcha, and if he now switches to a thought of happiness, mevi alat mo simcha, he brings upon himself simcha. Hakol taloi b'machshava. It all depends on the mind. The Stipler, who wrote many letters to one of my Rabbeim. One of my Rabbeim was Rabbi Yaakov Greenwald of blessed memory. He actually, this is like bonus information, the curriculum that I created was under his supervision. He was a very, very close chaver to the Stipler. He was extremely close to the Manchester Rosh Yeshiva. He was very close to Moshe Feinstein, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky. He was a very well-renowned in the Torah world, a very well-renowned psychologist. And I had many sessions with him where he went through my curriculum, and it cost me a small fortune to follow his corrections, because he would tell me this would fit more al pi chazal than what I had done. And he told me 25 years ago that he tried to start a Jewish Montessori yeshiva 40 years ago. So that's 25 plus 40. And if my math is not off, that's 65. I'm not really good at math. In fact, I failed so many times, I can't even count. So 65 years ago, he told me the yeshiva wasn't ready then, but he understood that the cup of Montessori is that they took, when I say they, her partner, who was Alyssa Franchetti, she was a traditional Sephardic Jew. And she was one who hired Maria Montessori to join in what was called Franchetti Montessori teacher training, in that order. Franchetti first. She was assassinated, and then the media, nothing's changed in 100 years, put out that she committed suicide. That was under Mussolini. They didn't want Jews having any prominent positions. So they made a whole scientific iyun into the pasuk, Hanach lana al pi darko. And that's where most of the principles of Montessori came from. So they kind of stole our pasuk and then made a whole big thing out of it, and it made it extremely popular. So Rabbi Yaakov Greenwald had many letters back and forth with the Stipler, and the Stipler writes to him, because he would ask the Stipler about all sorts of conditions he was dealing with. He had a lot of kids with ADD, ADHD, OCD. In my days it was only LSD. Never tried it myself. But he would write about Bochrim and Jungerleit who had different conditions that had labels and how to help them. And he would give his Das Torah, the Stipler would give his Das Torah. So on one occasion, this is like a generic kind of a question, he says, this person has so much atzvus and so much da'aga, his mind is playing games on him. That's not what I was looking for, sorry. This client of mine, he is really pained by the fact that his mind is full of thoughts and imaginations, all related to hihurei avera, thoughts of doing averas, or machshavas kafira, or denial of God's hashgacha, or sveikus be'emuna, ukedoima, etc. She'olim pitom b'machshavato, he gets these pop-ups suddenly arrive inside his mind. Av shelo ra, even if he never saw the item that is being popped up, he never saw it in reality, or chishev b'inyanim elu, never thought about these, but now he is, and he can't get them out of his mind. What should he do? So listen to the one-line answer of the Stipler. Ha'etza, al zeh rak achati, The strategy for this is only one item. Hesech hadat mikol ha'inyan. Stop thinking about it completely. Now, for most of us, we say, but yeah, that's very nice, but it doesn't work like that. But the Stipler, he does go a few more details, but he explains the only place I'm experiencing this concern of forbidden pictures popping up in my mind, or thoughts, or worries, or frustration, or anger, or hatred, or resentment, bitterness, all the stuff that keeps coming up, there's only one place I'm getting it, and that's over here. Which means that I could be, for example, really upset. I am so you very great! Michael, how are you? Really? Sure. In 5 minutes? Of course I'll be there. Yes, awesome. Awesome, yes. I'll see you. Bye. Now, how do I do that? How do I go from real outrage and suddenly I see it in a split second, Michael's called me, he's a client I've been chasing for months. If I get the commission on this deal, it's equivalent to 2 years' salary. So do you think I'm going to ignore the call? Or I'm going to take the call? But how do I do that? Because your mind is the control tower of your emotions. So it's possible on a spin of a split second that my mind would go to and I'm completely serious, and the guy says to me, I've thought about it, I've worked with so many agents now, you're the only one I think I can trust. Are you willing to meet in 5 minutes in my office around the corner, and we'll start closing the deal? What do you think I'm going to say? No, I'm in a big tiff right now with my spells. I can't, I'll call you when I can. That's crazy. Oh, so our emotions are actually controlled by what we're thinking. It's because I'm thinking I'm so mad at you that's making me mad. It's not you. Because if it was you, I wouldn't be able to be masir das, switch my mind to something else. And we do this all the time. One of my favorites for your daughters, the older ones kind of relate to it more, is I come home starving. For whatever reason, I just haven't eaten all day. I just love learning and working so hard, I forgot to eat. And so I make a beeline for the refrigerator, and just before I get there, oh, Hannah, I'm so glad you called. Got so much to catch up. I haven't spoken in 20 minutes. Let me tell you, I'm on the phone for an hour and a quarter. Put the phone down. Where was I? Oh yeah, I was starving. Excuse me. Wait, for an hour and a quarter, I wasn't thinking about food, and yet I started off starving, took the call, and now I'm trying to remember where was I? Oh yeah, I was starving. Do you hear that? It's not a problem. It's a celebration of how powerful the mind is. The mind is extremely, extremely intelligent and healthy. Every human being is born with the same wiring. I spoke to Rabbi Greenwald, the one I mentioned to you earlier. His wife, her name was Shoshana Greenwald. She made over 400 shidduchim without a single divorce. She's no longer alive, unfortunately. She and her husband passed away. But she was a real character. She was a survivor, a child survivor of the Holocaust. She worked for Raoul Wallenberg. Her father was extremely wealthy and worked with Raoul Wallenberg to save Jews. And many times, because she had blonde hair, she looked Aryan, so she wasn't considered necessarily Jewish on the outside. And she would smuggle money into Raoul Wallenberg to bribe whoever they had to bribe to help save Jews. There was one time she told me she was online. There was 2 long lines to a soup kitchen, which was just a table at the side of the road, and refugees were lining up, getting soup, and then the Nazis passed by in a truck, opened up the canvas, and a machine gun started gunning down everyone. And she said, I remember seeing people just drop on my left and my right. And I don't know why I asked the question, but I was just curious. I asked her, what was her gut reaction? She was 11 years old at the time. And she said her first reaction was, oh good, more soup for me. That wasn't being callous. See, when a person sees death once, twice, again and again and again, a person can go out of their mind. So the mind finds another way to handle it. You can't process it now. We're in a war. So afterwards, she was in the war. Afterwards, you can start thinking about it to try and process it better. But if I take it too seriously, I will collapse. Heart attack, chas v'shalom, or will not be able to function. So the mind finds ways to pay attention to something else. In this particular case, it was more soup for me. Not out of achzariot, of callousness for the value of life, but actually as a survival, innate survival mechanism. And just to give you a sample of who she was, after the war, she ended up in Eretz Yisrael, and she went into the Chazon Ish, and he gave her psak to dress not but senua. Short skirt, sleeveless, low neck, and with a cross on her neck. So that she could go into the monasteries, because she was pretending to be a Catholic. While she was a kid in the Holocaust, that's one of the ways she would get past the Nazis and deliver money. And what they didn't realize, there was jewelry in the containers that she was carrying. She went into a monastery in Eretz Yisrael and asked for a job. So they gave her washing dishes. And what ended up happening, they saw how efficient and competent, reliable she was. They started giving her more and more responsibilities. Till eventually they actually let her take groups for different activities. And she made up that she's going to take the children for a huge trip. 400 orphans. A few blocks away, she'd already arranged for Pe'ilim, waiting with trucks, to kidnap all these Jewish children from the monastery. That's why she says she was Zeicha to 400 Shidduchim. It's so interesting. I'm not giving you this as a heter to dress in a certain way. I'm just sharing with you an astonishing story. See, everything really ultimately takes place over here. A person, Chas v'Shalom, could be dressed the wrong way and wearing the wrong jewelry, but who am I? Who's the real me? Oh, this is the real me. Always. Always. So, I'm going to close in a couple of minutes with the question, which is what are you getting from this so far? But the main point is I'm going to share with you a lot of different metaphors. And one of them is, I left it upstairs. I'll bring it for you next week. I'll bring that. I don't have that with me now.
Should I go up and get it?
No, it's not. Won't be worth the time, and I want to finish that on one and allow for any comments, questions, or criticism. So I think I'm on safe ground when I share with you the Ramban, who tells us on the pasuk in Perek Daled, when Eliezer was going to make a shidduch for Yitzhak, he's on his way to find, eventually it would be Rivka, and Ve'ama Beliboy, he said to his mind. So look at the Ramban, because we would translate this as heart, but look at what Ramban tells us. V'chein kol amira imalev machshava. Every time the Torah talks about talking to the heart, it's referring to what you're thinking in your mind. So I'm just sharing with you the word leiv. Once we know it really means mind, it's going to change our whole world. So here's where I'm going to end. And this is a very simple law of the mind. It's brought in Sfarim. The Stipler actually brings it in one of his Teshuvas to Rabbi Greenwald. The Stipler brings this from other Sfarim, that it's not possible for the mind to contain two thoughts simultaneously. Your mind works so fast it appears as though we're multitasking, but actually my mind can only do one thing at a thought, one thought at a thought. It goes so fast that it looks like I'm doing lots of things simultaneously. But in reality, that's not how it works. In the physical world and the spiritual world, they reflect each other. So there's no such thing as a physical item that can contain another physical item. You've got to move it out of the way, even with atoms. So at the macro, micro level, in the physical world, everything has its own space. In the spiritual level, even though there's no such thing as space, but in the world of thought, there's no such thing as two thoughts simultaneously. And the reason why that's extremely important is because now you can answer the next question. How long is the life of a thought? As long as I think it. It could be a split second. It could be I can't fall asleep at night because I can't stop thinking about this. Oh, so how far am I ever away from a new thought? One thought. I'm one thought away from where I am now. Hesach hadas means put it aside and think about something else. Now, you and I might say, hey, that's very nice, but I'm scrolling down and I'm listening to different WhatsApps and this is horrific. And the answer is, well, what would happen if suddenly the kids came home, you didn't realize, oh my gosh, I have to prepare supper, and all of a sudden your mind goes to, or that phone call, or that appointment I'm now late for, and all of a sudden the mind goes there. I am my mind, in every which way. My mind affects my body in real time. My heart is affected by what I think, even to the point where my body, has v'shalom, can lose body fat because of worry. We're going to look at psukim. That kina and da'aga actually reduces body fat. That eventually reaches the bones, because in the words of Shlomo Melech, urkav atzamot kina. The bones literally rot from jealousy. Jealousy is not just a thought, it affects my heart and goes to every part of my body. So now, I close on a statement from Wendy Sagesi, who's a Jewish lady. Unfortunately, she married an Italian non-Jew. But I was in the audience with my wife. We were sitting chatting with her. We had no idea she was the next speaker. I memorized the speech, and I'm going to tell it to you by heart. It's only 7 seconds. The next 45 minutes that was allotted to her was all questions like, how did she come to this clarity? She stood up there, having been introduced. She was in stage 4 cancer. And that particular cancer she had, she was already 4 years in. And most people don't survive up to 5 years. And she stands there, and she was 8 years in. She died after 9.5 years. And she stood up there and she said the following words: I have cancer. I'm not cancer. My body has cancer. I'm not my body. End of speech. There's a simple clarity that where I truly function is over here. And if I'm thinking about death, thinking about torture, thinking about hostage, I'm not saying don't go there ever, but I am saying that if I get sucked into that, it can help me know what I'm thinking. And that's why God gave us feelings. They are our friends. Our feelings are more obvious to us than what we're thinking. Because it's just so obvious I'm thinking that I don't have to pay attention. So God gave us feelings to give me a sign that sends me to, what am I thinking? Oh, I'm feeling frustrated? Great, that means I'm experiencing frustrating thinking. Do I want to stay here, or do I want to switch? Do I want to look for a solution, or do I want to move on to something else? Oh, that's what I'm experiencing, my thoughts. No exceptions. Thank you for your patience. Any questions? Comments?
Are you going to teach how to move from thought to thought?
Yes. Yeah, I'm going to be sharing with you 28 metaphors. I'm not sure if I'll get through all of them. We've got 28 weeks of this for the students, so it's one metaphor a week. So I'll be going through those metaphors in the 10 weeks with you, and it's the metaphors that really help us to get a handle on how I'm actually experiencing what I'm thinking. And what's going to happen next, you tell me what will happen next if it's really true that I can switch from really thinking that you're making me mad to realizing it's my thinking of what you said or did that's making me mad. What might happen next? If I recognize that the true source, you might seem to be the trigger, but in reality, I've got to think about it to feel it. So what's the possible liberation that this whole concept is inviting us?
Doesn't hold power over you.
Sorry?
It doesn't hold power over you.
Doesn't have power with me.
I mean, it's very nice to say.
It's very nice to say. That's why I'll be sharing with you. It's a mature ladies group, so I can't do this with your daughters. But I'll be sharing with you people who've been through trauma that you and I would not say, I got off the phone and I was traumatized by that phone call. When we realize trauma is a word that we ought to be really reserving for serious pain. So I'll be sharing you stories of people being through extraordinary trauma and it didn't affect their mind. And how were they able to do that? Yes?
Advice until next week, how to control the mind and anxiety in today's atmosphere.
What's the question, sorry?
Just advice until next week.
Right.
To control, I guess, thought for this atmosphere that we're in right now.
Right, so I'm going to share with you, we're living in like a self-help world where the how-to is what I really want to like get to. What I'm going to be sharing with you is something that is the how-to, but the how-to is because I understand how my mind is working. And that's the place I need to like kind of let penetrate deep inside me, so that not that I know this intellectually, that it's really my thinking, but I start to experience it. I'll give you an example. It happened to me. I love nature. And one of the things I loved about the house I lived in before is that all my neighbors, you couldn't see one house. When the foliage was out there, it was beautiful. And I had a young kid, a 14-year-old, who was suffering from terrible anxiety in my above-ground basement, and I was talking to him about this topic, that what you're experiencing is what you're thinking. he's facing me here, and I'm facing all the windows to my backyard. My new neighbor, whose culture has a different relationship to nature, was cutting down one tree after the other. And I had never seen his house before when there's foliage. And meanwhile, I'm telling him that what you're really experiencing is what you're thinking. And it was so interesting to me that the moment it clicked that these trees are not going to grow in the next few weeks, it probably won't even grow in my lifetime. But if I'm going to focus on the fact that now I can't see this beautiful nature, then that's going to frustrate me. But if I want, and this just happened in like a click of a moment, I said if I want, I can look up and see the sky and enjoy the clouds. Every time I look at where the trees used to be, just look up and just enjoy the clouds. Why not? So I suddenly realized from the experience, it wasn't just an intellectual, it was, I was talking about it and then God sends me this Nisayan, right? And I love those trees. And there was nothing wrong with them, they're not dead trees. So, not an accusation against that neighbor, but it's so interesting when this sort of thing happens.
But you're saying that it can change your way of thinking. Can it change? Can it change the mitziut? How do you say that?
Excellent question. So how do I change the reality? Because the reality is still happening to me.
Right.
So I'll give you one of the most extreme examples is Dr. Viktor Frankl, when he was being operated on by the Nazis without anesthetic. He was what's called the father of logotherapy. Logo is really a Greek, the Latin word for meaning. So he developed a therapy. Therapy means healing. Therapy is a Hebrew term. That's where therapy comes from. He developed a way of thinking about what's the meaning in the pain. Because he would claim there's really two parts to pain. There's the physical mitziut of what I'm going through. ICU, operation, without anesthetic, will I live, will I not? And then there's the meaning I give what I'm going through. So he survived the war. He was 6 years in the concentration camps, 4 in Auschwitz, 2 in Dachau, I think it was. He lost his wife in the war. And after the war, he developed this even more because he saw during the war that the people who had the most chance of survival, this was his observation, were not the ones who necessarily arrived at the camps robust and strong. It was the ones who had the most reasons to survive. I'm going to survive. I want to reunite with my family. Even if I know everyone in my family is being murdered, I'm going to survive in order to remarry and start another Jewish family. These were thoughts that were shared of what's keeping them going. I want to win the war against Hitler by bringing more children into the world that he tried to destroy. I'm going to repopulate the Jewish people. So whatever meaning a person can give to what they're going through, so he said he had the most astonishing insight. While they were operating on his body with no anesthetic, he said the following: I experienced the greatest imaginable liberation. I realized the Nazis had my body and they could do anything they wanted with it. But as long as they didn't own my mind, I was free and they were slaves. So it's an astonishing insight. There are various tzaddikim who, during an operation without anesthetic, actually, by election, would ask not to be anesthetized, and they would think Torah in that time. I can't do that. Rabbi Kiva was able to do that while he was being tortured. There are people, but that's an example where nothing changed outside. Everything changes inside. And when things change inside, my understanding of outside also changes. When we change what's inside, I'm giving away a little secret that's going to come up next week probably. Just like faces are perfectly reflected in waters, you smile water, water smiles back. That means, just like you smile, someone smiles back at you, or you smile, the mirror smiles back at you, what you're thinking, therefore feeling, that's what other people are picking up on. So when we change what's taking place in here, and therefore over here, the other person may not pick up on it straight away, but we can change the mitziut literally, because we're putting out different vibes, if you want to call it. We change ourselves, and when we change ourselves, we change the response of other people to a different us. So that's how it happens. It may not always be immediate, because they may not even trust that this is going to be a new track record of a new me. But when we change ourselves, we actually change the world. The whole universe is changed because of a thought. That's a separate discussion. We might get to it. Thank you for your indulgence.
Can we change it to 11 like we said?
Yeah, I think there was a request for 11 o'clock, and it seems that